Hi, hello everyone. I'm a tutor of Uplatz. This is HTML5 and CSS session part 14. To know more about us, please use this website address which I have given in my presentation. So let's see the agenda for today's session. So today we are going to discuss about cascading and speciality, how the cascading of main elements in HTML5 is happening with CSS, colors, opacity, what are the length units, and how the pseudo elements and positioning is happening mainly. So first thing is how to calculate a selector speciality. So each individual CSS selector has its own property speciality value. So every selector in a sequence increase the sequence's overall speciality. So the selector falls into one of the three different speciality groups, mainly A, B, and C. So when multi-selector sequences select a given element, so that what that browser will do, it uses the styles applied by the sequence with highest overall speciality. So based on that, it will calculate the selector speciality. So group A ID selectors just like hash. So B class selectors, attribute selectors, pseudo class, example bar. So C is like type selectors, pseudo elements, which is like for div before, after, first letter. So that must be like in the C category. So group A is more specific, followed by group B, and finally it will be like group C. So the star, which is like the universal selector, and combinators like greater than tilde, which has no speciality. So the important declaration, which is like is used to override the usual speciality in the style sheets by giving higher value priority to the particular rule. So its usage and then property, it's always defines a value how you can use. So if for something you need to mention important while giving a CSS property, so you need to use like this. So value exclamatory symbol important. So this is how you need to do. So you can see here. So in for the element my div, I just made a font weight bold should be important. So that particular property will not be get overridden. So you can see here for sorry another element, two elements outer div and my div, I just made a font weight to normal, which means even though if it has higher speciality because of important declaration above. So the avoid usage of important is strongly recommended, because why I'm telling, like it will disturb the natural flow of CSS rule, which become uncertainty among them. So also it is important to note, when multiple important declarations are applied on the same rule for the particular certain elements, then higher speciality will also get applied. So where using important declaration cannot be justified. So if your rules should not be overridden by any inline style of a elements which is written inside the style attribute of the HTML means, so to give the user more control over web accessibility, like increasing or decreasing of the font size by overriding the author style using the important. So for testing and debugging, so that you can use inspect element. So for colors, current color, it always returns the computed value of the current element. So use in same element. So here current color evaluates to read, since color property is set to red. Sorry, for div I have mentioned color red. So border is like 5px solid current color. So the box shadow would be 005px current color. So this is the property which I have mentioned to the div. So in that case, specifying current color for border is more robust by omitting it will give predominant results. So only you can use the current color inside the border property with the same element, but if it would be overridden otherwise due to some more specific selector, it did get avoided. So since it is a computed color, so the border will be green in the following example. So due to second rule overriding the first. So div color blue. So border I have mentioned as 3px solid current color and color would be green. So it is inherited from the parent element. So the parent color is inherited here. Current color evaluates to blue, making the child element's border color blue. So this is how it is inherited from the parent element. So you can see here, this is the parent class. I've just make a color blue. So what I'm doing for child class, I'm just inheriting that from the parent class, and then I'm just saying border color is current color. The current color is nothing but blue. But normally you can also use by other rules which would not inherit it from the color property such as background color. So example will show the children using the color set in the parent as its background. So the parent class color would be blue, and here you can see the background color for the parent and child class would be the current color. Sorry. So next is color keywords. So the most browsers support using the color keywords is used to specify a color. So for example, to set color of an element to blue, you can use a blue keyword. But this is in some classes, you can also mention a color to blue. So the CSS keywords are not case sensitive, but either blue, either it is case sensitive, it will always results in the same result. They are not case sensitive. So for example, this is all the color code for the colors which we have in Java CSS3. For the HTML element, whatever element you can use. So for example, I have shown you few colors. So there are many other colors. When you browse, you will be able to know. So this is color name, hexa value, and RGB value for the particular color. So if you want more colors, there are n number of colors, which is like hundreds of colors are available in CSS3, so that you can use whatever you want. So next is hexadecimal value. So background, so CSS color may also be represented as hexa triplet. So where member represent red, green, and blue components of a color. So each of these values represents a number in the range of 00 to FF or 0 to 255 in decimal notation. So basically the uppercase or lowercase hexadecimal value may be used to this particular thing. So the browser interprets hash 369 as hash 3336699. So if that is not what you intended, but rather wanted, like, you need to specify that explicitly. So the total number of colors that can be represented with the hexa notation is 256 to the power of 3, or it can be also like this 16 comma 777 comma 216, which is nothing but 256 to the power of 3. So for syntax, you can mention hash rrggbb or like rgb. So rr is like 0 to ff for the amount of red, and gg just like 0 to ff of green, bb is for amount of blue. So you can see here, I have mentioned some class name and color equivalent. So this is equivalent to the color keyword blue. So next is, also you can mention like this also. If you specify each value with single number, then also you can mention like this. So RGB notation. So how? So RGB is a additive color model which represent color as mixture of red, green and blue light. So in essence, the RGB representation is decimal equivalent of hexadecimal notation. So in hexadecimal, each number ranges from 00 to FF, which is equivalent to 0 to 255 in decimal and also in percentages. In some classes, scalar RGB is equivalent to blue and color RGB 0, 0, 255. So syntax would be RGB red, green and blue. So for red, an integer value from 0 to 255 or percentage from 0 to 100. So for green, an integer value is from 0 to 255 or percentage from 0 to 100. And for blue, an integer from 0 to 255, percentage from 0 to 100. So this should be the notation and syntax for red, green and blue for RGB. So next is RGBA notation. So it is also similar to RGB notation, but then we have some additional alpha opacity value. So opaque red, which means I have mentioned red. So RGBA 255001, which is like opacity. So 50%, which is like half translucent red, means I need to mention 50%, which is like 0.5 opaque, the same red. So this is the same, this is the thing, same like RGB, but opacity value is added here. So syntax, so red for 0.55 and opacity percentage from 0 to 100 same. Green, blue, everything is same as RGB, but only one thing, alpha, which is like opacity and number from 0 to 1, where 0.0 is fully transparent and 1.0 is fully opaque. HSL notation. So it stands for hue, which color, saturation, how much, and lightness, how much you want. So it's represented as angle from 0 to 360 without units, while saturation and lightness are represented as percentage. So for the element P, so color HSL, just like 240, 100 and 50. So for HSLA notation is similar to HSL, but with an added opacity value HSLA 240, 150 percentage, zero transparent, and HSLA is like half translucent blue, which is like 0.5, 50 percentage opacity. So fully opaque blue for HSLA is like 100 percentage. So syntax is like hue, saturation, lightness, and alpha. So that would be the syntax for H for hue, saturation, L is lightness, A is for alpha. So value and description for that. So hue, HUE, which is like specified in degrees around a color where 0 is red, 60 degrees yellow, 120 degrees green, and 180 degrees cyan, 240 blue, 300 is magenta, 360 is red. So like this, it is always specified in degree around the wheel, but without units. So saturation is percentage, where 0 percentage is fully desaturated, grayscale, whereas 100 percentage is fully saturated, which is vividly colored. So next is lightness. So lightness, the percentage where 0 percentage is fully black and 100 percentage is fully white. So next is alpha, a number from 0 to 1, where 0 is fully transparent and 1 is fully opaque. So next is opacity, property, an element opacity can set using the opacity property, whereas values can anywhere from 0.0 to 1.0 opaque. So the example usage for div style opacity 0.8. So this is partially transparent element. So property value transparency. So opacity is 1.0, it is opaque, and 0.75 is 25% transparent, which is like 75% opaque. 0.5 is 50% transparent, 50% opaque. 0.25 is 75% transparent and 25% opaque. So next is IE compatibility for opacity is just used in all version of Internet Explorer, but also it works in IE 8 and 9 too. So modern browser also it will support. So next is length units. So creating scalable elements using REMs and EMS. So you can use REM defined by font size of your HTML tag to style elements by setting their font size to a value of REM and use EM inside the element to create element that's scalable with your global font size. So for HTML, input type button, value button, range, text, value, text. So relevant CSS would be, so for input type button, range, text, for everything I have made font size. So in PX or REM. So with also I have mentioned as EM, padding EM, so everything in EM. So we can find the difference for them. So font size with REM, which is like new units including REM, which is like root EM. So difference between them is like EM is related to font size of parent. So this causes a compounding issue, whereas REM is related to the font size of root or HTML element. So this means it is possible to declare a single font size for the HTML element and define all REM units to be percentage of that. So the main issue using REM for font sizing is that values are somewhat difficult to use. So here is an example of some common font sizes expressed in REM units, assuming the base size is to 16px. So just you can see here for 10px it is like 0.625 REM, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 24, 30, 32. Just like 0.75, 0.875, and for 16 is 1 rem, 18 is 1.125, and 20 is 1.25, 24 is 1.5, 30 is 1.875. So this is what this pixel will be equivalent to this much rem. So font size 16px will be equivalent to 2 rem, which means 16px 1 rem. So it should be 2 rem will be equal to 32px. So this is the notation for that. So 1 rem is 16px and 1.5 em would be 24px. So next is Vmin and Vmax. So relative to 1% of viewport smaller dimension, Vmax would be equivalent to 1% of viewport's larger dimension. So in other words, 1 VM should be equivalent to uh, small of 1 VH and 1 VW. So 1 Vmax is equivalent to the larger 1 VH and 1 VW. So note, Vmax is not supported in any version of IE, and VH and VW introduced 2 units for representing a size. So that VH, it stands for viewport height, is relative to 1% of a viewport height. VW, which stands for viewport width, which is relative to 1% of viewport width. So div width is 20 VW and height is 20 VH. Above that, the size for the div, it takes up 20% the width and height of the viewport. So next is using percentage. So one of the useful unit when creating a responsive application is it's always depend on its parent container. So equation for that is parent container width into percentage will always give you the output. So for example, you can see the parent has 100% width while child is 50. So one output, the child with output would be half 50% of parent, which then it would be like 50 px. So this is how you need to calculate. So for HTML, it's the parent child. So for star, I'm just having a color. For parent, I'm just making background blue, and with this 100, child is green and 50. So when you run this, you'll be able to know the difference. So next is pseudo elements. So the pseudo elements are added to selectors, but instead of describing a special state, they allow you to style certain parts of a document. So the content attribute is required for pseudo elements to render. So it is how it also allows you to select instead of describing a special state. The attribute can also have the empty value. For example, content double quotes just like empty. So div after content I have color is red. So border would be 1px solid red. So next is like div color black, border is 1px solid black, padding is 1px. So div before content color green, border is 1px solid green. So these are the pseudo elements before and after. Sorry, it has. So the pseudo elements in lists. So they are often used to change the look of the list, mostly for unordered lists, just like UL. So, so the first step is to remove the default list. So UL, so that what I need to do, list style type is none. So I'm just removing, and after that I am just adding the custom styling. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a gradient boxes for bullets. Sorry. So for that, list before content, I'm just making that to empty, and display inline block, margin is 10 px, height is 10, width is also 10. So for background linear gradient, I'm just making to red and blue. So HTML, so this is unordered list. I'm just making test 1, test 2. So based on that, inline and then background color for that particular li, everything will become a display. So next is overlapping element with z index. So how to do that? So to change the default stack order position elements set to relative and absolute or fixed, you need to use the z index. So the higher the z index, higher up the stacking content that it is placed. So for example, below an z index value of 3 puts green on top, and z index of 2 puts red, just under that, and is it index of 1 puts blue under that. So HTML div 1 id, div 2 id, and div 3. So these three are id, so I'm just making position to absolute for the common div, and for that div id 1 I'm just making is at index 1. So after that I'm just making top and background blue. So in order to differentiate the three div, I'm just making is at index 3 for the second div and color is green. So div 3 I'm just making is at index to 2 and color is red. So that you can see when running this, so one over that overlapping of that three divs based on that is at index will get displayed on your browser. So what is absolute positioning? So when absolute positioning is used, a box of the desired elements which is taken out normal flow, and it is no longer affects the position of other elements. So that offset property is top, right, left, bottom. You can also specify the element that appear in relation to its next non-static containing element. So ABS position absolute top is 0 px and left is 500 px. So this code will move the box containing element with attribute class ABS, and down is 0 px, right is 500 px relative to its containing element. So next is fixed position. So defining a position as fixed, we can remove an element from a document flow and it set its position relatively to a browser window. So one obvious use is when we want something to be visible, we can make scroll to a bottom. So that what I'm going to do. So the this is an ID making a position fixed top and left to be 50 10 px. So next is relative. So that relative moves the element in relation where it would have a normal inflow. So next offset properties for this relative positioning is same top, left, bottom, right, indicate how move the element far from its normal flow. I'm just making position to relative, top and bottom. So it will move the box containing element attributes to the relative position to 20 px down and 30 px to the right. Sorry, where it can be in the normal flow. So next is static positioning. So the default position of an element is static. So to quote, so this keyword lets the element use normal behavior in its current position in the flow. So the top, right, bottom, left, z index properties does not will apply. So for that particular element, I'm just mentioned position to static. So layout control. So the display property. So the display CSS property is fundamental for controlling the layout and flow of a HTML document. So the more elements have default display value, either block or inline. So what is inline? So this inline element occupies only as much width as necessary. Also, it stacks horizontally with other element of the same type that may not or contain other inline non-inline elements. So span, this is some bolded text inside that. So I demonstrated the two inline elements of span and B or inline, hence the name should not break the flow of the text. So next is block. So this block element occupies a maximum available width of its parent element. It starts with a new line, and in contrast to inline elements, it does not restrict the type of the elements it may contain. So div hello world, this is an example. So the div is a block level by default as shown above. So the two block elements are vertically stacked, and like the inline elements, the flow of text break. So the inline block value gives the best of both words. So it bends the element in flow of the text, allowing us to use padding, margin, height as no visible effect. So by default, they are also shrunk to a smallest size possible to accommodate their content. So inline unordered list, for the style I just make the list, background and then border, color, width, styles, everything. So for unordered list, I am just have first, second, and third elements. Block unordered list, you just only one thing changed. Display is made as block. So this is block unordered list. Other things are same. Border style, border color, border width, padding. This is background. So next is inline block unordered. So background, padding, border width, border color style, everything is same. Only thing display is inline block. So next other remaining HTML part is same. So for none. So the element that is given a none value to display the property which is not displayed at all. So for example, let's create a div element that has id of my div. So div id my div, this can be now marked nothing displayed by the following rule. So you can see uh, my div id which is marked as display none. To get old table structure using the div means what you need to do. This is normal HTML table structure. So style table with style. I'm just closing table inside the trtd and slash td slash tr. I'm just closing the table. So this is how you need to use. And the above implementation also you can use same like inside the style table div, display should be table. So table row div, display is table row, cell is display table cell. So this is the ID. I behave like table, it would behave like whatever the things inside it will display. So this is the summary of today's session. So we had been discussing about cascading and speciality, colors, obesity, length units, pseudo elements, and positioning. So I'm just closing this theory part. So quickly we can enter into the practical demo. For that, I would be sharing my screen. So let's see the program one by one. We have, so I just having from 80, 81, 82, yeah, this thing, 83, 84, 85, 80. Okay. So just see the first program. So this is like for difference between EM and RM for the particular thing. So for HTML, um, so this is a HTML program. Type button, range, and text. For everything, I just made the font size to in pixel and or else rep. So let's run and see this 80. So I'm just running through Chrome, so it is getting delayed. So meanwhile, this is for inline. Okay, it has come. So 1 minute. Yeah. So it is getting delayed. So the browser is not getting refreshed. Okay. So it is slowly. Okay. So this is the difference for PX and EM. So for that particular thing, I have made button, progress bar, so everything. So in order to that, so the next program would be like list I have. For that particular list, I just make the background color, display inline block, margin, everything. So if I run that 81, so you can see here for background color, display inline block, everything gets applied. So if you try to change that to block, you can also change that. So next is for relative absolute positioning. For 3 divs, I just make z index 1, and for second div, I just make z index 2, and for third div, I have made z index 3. So when I run that, it will be just overlapping based on the z index value. You can see that. So this is div 1, div 2, and div 3. So based on that, it is getting overlapped. So this is div 3, div 1, and div 2. Okay. So the next program would be to display inline. So how it is getting display? So everything was same, but display inline I have made. So what is that? So this is the inline. So next is, so this would be example for display block. So this is displayed in block level elements. Sorry. So next is display inline block. So this is an example for display inline block. So everything remaining is same, only I have changed this. I'm just showing the difference between inline block, and block level elements. So this next example is like I have a container and class item 1 to 4. Sorry, this should be example for next practical demo. Okay, this is all about today's session. If you have any queries regarding my practical as well as theory part of today's session, please write to info@uplatz.com. Thank you. See you all on my next session.